Good morning, students. Our lesson for today is modal verbs. So let us now see the learning competencies under modal verbs. Relate text context to particular social issues, concerns, or dispositions in real life. Next competency, analyze the stand of the speaker based on the explicit statement made. And the last is express permission, obligation, and prohibition. A modal verb is a type of verb that is used to indicate modality, that is, the likelihood, ability, permission, request, capacity, suggestions, order, obligation, or an advice. Examples of modal verbs are can, must, shall, will, could, might, would, should, and have to. There are some instances where we use modals. First, we use modals to show if we believe something is certain, possible, or impossible. For an example, my keys must be in the car. The next example is, it might rain tomorrow. And the last one is, that can't be Peter's coat, it's too small. And another instance where we use modals is when we do two things like to talk about ability, ask permission, make requests, and offers. Like for example, I can't swim. Another example, may I ask a question? Or an offer or an request is, could I have some tea please? Let us now discuss the types of modal verbs. The first type is permission. The modals that is used under permission is can, may, and could. Can is most often used to ask for or give permission, but may and could are also possible even though they are not used as often as can. Examples: can I borrow a pen? You can sit here. The seat is free. Could I open the window? May I ask a question? These are some examples of sentences that we use the permission or the modal verbs under permission. Another type of modal verbs is prohibition. The modal verbs under prohibition is can't and must not or mustn't. Can't and mustn't are used to show something is prohibited or not allowed. Examples: you can't go into that restaurant without a tie. Another example, you can't drive in that country unless you are over 18 years old. Can't or cannot usually gives the idea of something that is against the rule. Must not or mustn't usually means that is the speaker who is setting the rule. The last type of modal verbs is obligation. The modal verbs that are used in obligation is have to and must. Both are used to express obligation. There is a slight difference in the way that they are both used. Have to shows the obligation comes from someone else and not the speaker itself. This is usually referring to a rule or a law. For an example, we have to be at the airport at least 2 hours before the flight. Another example, I have to work on Sunday. Another example, they have to wear their uniforms at school. While for must, it shows that the obligation comes from the speaker itself. An example, I must hand in my thesis by tomorrow. Another example, I really must call my parents now. So students, we will watch a spoken poetry video entitled Dear Future Generations, Sorry, by Prince Aya talking about climate change.
Dear future generations, I think I speak for the rest of us when I say, sorry. Sorry we left you with our mess of a planet. Sorry that we were too caught up in our own doings to do something. Sorry we listened to people who made excuses to do nothing. I hope you forgive us. We just didn't realize how special the earth was. Like a marriage gone wrong, we didn't know what we had until it was gone. For example, I'm guessing you probably know it as the Amazon desert, right? Well, believe it or not, it was once called the Amazon rainforest, and there were billions of trees there, all of them gorgeous, and... oh, You don't know much about trees, do you? Well, let me tell you, trees are amazing. I mean, we literally breathe the air they are creating. They clean up our pollution, our carbon. They store and purify water, give us medicine that cures our diseases, food that feeds us, which is why I'm so sorry to tell you that we burn them down. Cut them down with brutal machines, horrific, at a rate of 40 football fields every minute. That's 50% of all the trees in the world gone in the last 100 years. Why? For this. And that wouldn't make me so sad if it weren't so many pictures of leaves on it. You know, when I was a child, I read how the Native Americans had such consideration for the planet that they felt responsible for how they left the land for the next 7 generations. Which brings me great sorrow, because most of us today don't even care about tomorrow. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we put profit above people, greed above need, the rule of gold above the golden rule. I'm sorry we use nature as a credit card with no spending limit, overdrafting animals to extinction, stealing your chance to ever see their uniqueness or become friends with them. Sorry we poison the ocean so much that you can't even swim in them. But most of all, I'm sorry about our mindset, 'cause we had the nerve to call this destruction progress. Hey Fox News, if you don't think climate change is a threat, I dare you to interview the thousands of homeless people in Bangladesh. See, while you were in your penthouse nestled, their homes were literally washed away beneath their feet due to rising sea levels. And Sarah Palin, you said that you love the smell of fossil fuels. Well, I urge you to talk to the kids of Beijing who are forced to wear pollution masks just to go to school. See, you can ignore this, but the thing about truth is, it can be denied, not avoided. So I'm sorry, future generations. I'm sorry that our footprint became a sinkhole and not a garden. I'm sorry that we paid so much attention to ISIS and very little to how fast the ice is melting in the Arctic. I'm sorry we doomed you, and I'm sorry we couldn't find another planet in time to move to. You know what? Cut the beat. I'm not sorry. This future, I do not accept it, because an error does not become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We can redirect this. How? Let me suggest that if a farmer sees a tree that is unhealthy, they don't look at the branches to diagnose it, they look at the root. So like that farmer, we must look at the root, and not to the branches of government, not to the politicians run by corporations. We are the root, we are the foundation. This generation, it is up to us to take care of this planet. It is our only home. We must globally warm our hearts and change the climate of our souls and realize that we are not apart from nature, we are a part of nature. And to betray nature is to betray us. To save nature is to save us. Because whatever you're fighting for, racism or poverty, feminism, gay rights, or any type of equality, it won't matter in the least. Because if we don't all work together to save the environment, we will be equally extinct. Sorry. Hey guys, for the past several weeks, I've been here in Africa, the heart of Africa, witnessing the horrific destruction of the rainforest, which inspired me to write this piece. Why are forests being destroyed at such an enormous rate? For this. Today we live in a world where destroying trees makes you money. So what can we, normal people, do about it? One way to directly fight the destruction is to stand for trees. By standing for trees, not only can you save the lives of trees, help forest communities, and protect the rights of animals to live in their homes, but you will also balance the amount of pollution that you yourself give off with your everyday activities, making you a part of the solution and not the problem. This is the option that I chose. But whatever way that you choose to stand for trees, do it. Because a wise man once said, when the rivers are all dried up and the trees cut down, man will then realize that he will not be able to eat money.
So for your activity called the four corners of inquiry, I will select four students to formulate their statements using modal verbs. Hence, you must type SA for if you strongly agree with the statement of your classmates, A if you agree, D for disagree, and SD for if you strongly disagree. And you must say your reason why you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree in the chat box. So here are some examples of the statements that I formulated as an example for you, for the four students that will formulate their statements. And if you also want to formulate your statements aside from the four students, you can do so and share it in the class. So the one example is we must act on climate change now or it will be too late. Another statement, we should start in our home by doing simple things like segregating garbage. And the last statement, we have to stop prioritizing money over the future of the next generation. So now you prepare your statements and we will discuss if you strongly agree or disagree or and why you have that opinion.
Once again, good day, students. For our problem scenario, we will talk about a young girl. I bet some of you have seen her in your TV, in social media, in the internet, or maybe in magazines. Yes, in fact, she is Greta Thunberg. She is the very famous Greta Thunberg. In Swedish, I think it is pronounced Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg. I hope I say it right. Okay. Now, yes, she is from Sweden. She is 18 years old this year and she is, in fact, an environmental activist. Today, she is one of the most prominent environmental activists around the world. Now, listen carefully, students, because I will talk about her story. Now, Greta herself first learned about global warming at the age of 8 when she and her classmates were shown documentaries about climate change at school. At school, she was always the one who sat quietly at the back of the classroom, but she remembers being more affected than the other students. Greta said that my classmates were concerned when they watched the film, but when it stopped, they started thinking about other things. I couldn't do that. Those pictures were stuck in my head. Now, students, how about you? When did you first learn about climate change? And how did it affect you? Were you like Greta, who thought about it, who pondered and who contemplated about it? Or were you like her classmates who were concerned about it at first, but in the end, they forgot about it or they just didn't care about it? They were concerned, but they didn't do anything about it. Okay, so think about that, students. After learning about global warming, she couldn't simply go back to normal to continue with her studies and think about something else. And at the age of 11, Greta experienced a period of depression. Out of her struggle with depression came the spark of activism. Now, she was diagnosed with Asperger's autism syndrome, which helps explain her remorseless focus on the core issue of climate change. After overcoming depression, she made a promise to herself to do everything she could to make a difference, and she stuck to that promise. She started small. At the age of 15, she entered a climate writing competition. And you are grade 9 students, right? And you are either, I think, 14 or 15 or even 16 years old, right? And at that age, she was able to do a great change. On August 20 of 2018, she conducted her first school strike alone. She was alone. She promised to continue the protest until the Swedish government met the carbon emissions target agreed by the world leaders in Paris in 2015. This is a picture of her alone protesting and she sat down outside the Swedish parliament with a piece of wood which she had painted with the now famous words, I cannot say it, but it's translated to school strike for climate. And she vowed to continue until the Swedish government met the carbon emission target. She also took flyers in which she had written a list of facts about global warming and climate change. And the next day, she was back in the same place, striking again. But this time, she wasn't alone. People started joining her on her strike, which took place until the Swedish national elections took place on the Sunday of September 9, 2018. That's 21 days of striking. At such a young age, she was able to make a huge impact in saving the earth. And in 2019, she was the cover of Times magazine. She was in the 2019's Person of the Year in Time magazine, which is really a big deal because it's Time magazine, right? And she was invited in a lot of talks in TED Talk and a lot of conference for UN climate change conferences. At the age of 17, Greta has succeeded in creating a global attitudinal shift, transforming millions of vague, middle of the night anxieties into a worldwide movement calling for urgent change. This is from Time magazine. Greta says that big governments and businesses around the world are not moving quickly enough to cut carbon emissions and has attacked world leaders for failing the young people. Initially, her protest focused on the Swedish government's climate targets, and she urged students around the world to make similar demands in their own countries. I said a while ago that Greta started small. She started with a writing competition. Then she started her own protest, a good cause protest to the government actually, because it's about the flaw of their government in Sweden. It's something that is really true. And I'm not saying here that you should also quit school and protest against the government. No, definitely not. You might say that, Ma'am, we are not confident or brave enough to rally. No, it doesn't have to be like that. So what can you do? There are a lot of things that you can actually do. You talk about this in your other subjects, and there are a lot of things that you can do, small or big ones. Now, you can start with yourself, and then in your own home, and then in your own community. Okay. Here are some questions that you can ask yourself. What environmental problems do you see in your community? It can be in your own barangay, in your own sitio, in your province, in your municipality, or here in Benguet, whole Benguet. And then, in a larger scale, our country. What environmental problems do you see in our country? And what can you do about it? Okay, ask yourself, what can I do about it? Okay, let us now proceed to define the problem and brainstorm. We will use the KW chart. Now, K stands for what I know. So what do you already know about climate change, about environmental issues and problems? What do you already know about your community? So these are what do the students already know. Next is what I want to know. W. What I want to know. What are the areas that you are lacking information? And then lastly, in the process review, we will have the what I learned. Okay, so that's at the ending. First, we will have what I know and what I want to know. Okay. First, what I know, here are some that I listed. Climate change affects us all, right? Next, world leaders need to do more about climate change. And then this is from our problem scenario, Greta Thunberg, governments and businesses around the world are not moving quickly enough to cut carbon emissions. And then the government and big businesses should invest their money in existing sustainable technologies, research, and in restoring nature. Okay, these are some of the what I know. There are a lot that you can actually list in here. Next, what I want to know. Now I came up with some questions or some statements that we want to know more about. First is environmental problems present in the community. So what are these? Next, policy or laws about environment in the community. And then, simple ways to help mitigate environmental problems and the more complex ways to help mitigate environmental problems. Moving forward, we will now transform those statements into problems or issues that we will solve. First one, what environmental problems do you observe from your community? Next, identify policy or laws about environment that people in your community do not obey. Next one, as a citizen and student, what simple ways can you do in your community to help diminish the problems identified? And lastly, identify sustainable innovations, researches, and ideas that your community can implement.
To start with this project, you will be divided into 5 groups according to the barangay where you reside, and you will work collaboratively to answer the problems identified earlier. Also, you will be given 6 meetings to come up with your outputs. The first 3 meetings will be used for brainstorming and research, and the last 3 meetings will be for making and finalizing your presentations. Since most of you are from these 5 identified barangays, this is how the class will be divided. Those who live in Barangay Betagla, Trinidad will be Group 1. Group 2 will be assigned in Barangay Pugis. Group 3 will work in Barangay Pingat, Baguio City. Group 4 will be under Barangay Pinsao, and the last group will work in Barangay Ukab, Itogon. After investigating in your respective community, you will act as representatives of your own barangay in a symposium entitled Baguio Benguet Environmental Conference. Each group will create a presentation and discuss the information gathered as well as the recommendations they came up with as a group. So this is what each group will do. For Group 1, you will create a documentary about the effects of climate change in your community. You must also include your suggestions on how to solve it. Then, it will be presented in the conference, of course. After presenting your output, add some supplementary information so that the audience will understand your point, since they will be allowed to comment on your work afterwards. And here's an example of a documentary.
Tuwing 10 taon, merong malaking bahang nagaganap. 1978, malaking baha. Tapos sa 10 taon, 1988, malaking baha uli. Tapos sa 10 taon, 1999, malaking baha na naman. Tropical Storm Undoy, 2009, dinali na naman kami. 10 taon na naman. Ito lahat ay nagmula sa pag-iinit ng klima. Climate change na ito. Napakaganda ang buhay nung bata pa ako doon sa Paco, Maynila. Kasi ilang lakad mo lang, mga 150 metro lamang mula sa bahay namin, ay bukid na, may bukid na. At doon kami naglalaro. Naging playground ko bukid. Sa pusod ng Maynila, may bukid. Ang gilid ng Pedro Hill noon ay punong-puno ng puno. Puno ng kamatsile. Doon nga kami naglalaro ng holin sa gilid ng Pedro Hill. Sa ilalim ng mga puno ng kamatsile. At sa gabi, alam mo, nakikita ko may mga alitap-tap. Nawala na lahat yan. Nawala na lahat yan sa takbo ng panahon. Sa dami ng tao, dumami ang mga bahay, mga bukirin, naging semento na. At ang kapalit ay pagbaha, pagdumi ng ilog, at nawala ang mga bukid. Dumami ang tao. Dikit-dikit na kami. Binabaha na kami. Kaya noong 1971, umalis kami ng Maynila. Lumipat kami rito sa San Mateo. Ngunit, yon, pareho ang kinahinatnan ng kapaligiran. Nung pinanggalingan ko sa Paco, ay hindi nagtagal, ganun din nangyari dito sa kapaligiran dito sa aming barangay Banaba, San Mateo Rizal. Ang ilog ay unti-unti nang dumudumi. Napakarami ng mga bundok ang napatag sa Montalban at sa San Mateo. Nagkaroon ng problema. Nakita ko sa lugar. Naobserbahan ko lugar. Galing ko Maynila. Naobserbahan ko lugar. Kinakailangan ugatin ang problema ng climate change. Kinakailangan may karampatang kilos ang mga tao. Lahat ng tao ay meron din kakayahan makatulong sa pagsagka ng climate change. Hindi lang unawa eh. Isang level yung unawa. Pero mas malalim pa ay yung kilos. Pagtatanim. Tulad ng ginagawa namin dito sa Puglog Tao, sa mga pamayanan, huwag magsunog ng basura. So, nagpatas ng kamalayan, sumunod, nag-organisa, sumibol nga ang Buklod Tao, sumibol nga ang aming community-based disaster risk reduction management, sumibol na ang aming pagpapataas ng kapasidad ng komunidad, hanggang sa nagkaroon kami ng ganitong evacuation center, nagkaroon kami ng mga proyekto sa pagtatanim, sa livelihood program, at sa paggawa ng bangka, para bigyan ng bangka ang mga vulnerable komunidad. Pero ako isang tao lamang, isang simpleng mamamayan. Tumatanda na. Pero sinasabi ko ngayon dito, dinanas ko ang magandang kapaligiran. Ito na nga, ang climate change. Nandito na tayo. Gawin natin ang bawat makakaya natin gawin. Pwede pa.
For Group 2, you will present the information gathered, including your recommendations, through discussion with the aid of a PowerPoint presentation. Throughout your discussion, you must interact with your audience to make the presentation lively. Group 3 will perform a talk show featuring the environmental problems brought about by climate change in your community. Of course, you have to include your suggested solutions to these problems. After that, the viewers will be given a chance to give remarks on your work. For Group 4, you will create a short movie showing how climate change affects your community, as well as your proposed solutions to this problem. Then, the audience will take time to comment on your output. For the last group, you will also present through a PowerPoint presentation but with video discussions attached on each slide. After that, just like with the other groups, the viewers will be allowed to give remarks on your presentation. Be reminded that the following officials will be invited in the conference, so you have to add extra effort in doing your outputs.
In the presentation of learning, the students will present to the class what they learned from the lesson and activity they conducted. For the process review, let's fill out the KWL chart. On the last column, what I learned. Let's answer the following questions such as, number 1, what part of the activities we have completed you like and don't like the most? Number 2, how did each member of your group accomplish their role? Number 3, how did you spend your resources like time and financial? Number 4, did you accomplish your objectives through the explanations and solutions you delivered? After that, you will evaluate your own performance using the self and peer evaluation rubric. The criteria is the following. Presentation of the topic is equal to the 30 points, content 40 points, output creativity 15 points, Teamwork, 15 points for a total of 100 points. And that's it for our topic on the fourth quarter, week 4 of grade 9 lesson. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have learned something from our topic. That's all. Goodbye.